In this video, I'm going to show you how to do this cool typewriter effect using Unity. And I'll also go over the data that you put into the typewriter effect using things like a scriptable object, JSON, or a string array. So stay tuned. Since we are using Unity's UI component, add the library to the top of the script. To visualize the text, create a variable that stores the text component. That way we can assign it in the inspector. This action is occurring over time, so we need this to happen in the update function. As the timer counts down, we are going to slowly show the text. This variable will help indicate how much of the string is currently being shown. This variable is the time it will take to show each character in the string. Increment the timer by the time per character variable, and also increment the char index. Create a temporary string that updates with the substring, so we can assign it back to the text component. We want to show one message at a time, so there needs to be a variable that keeps track of the current message being displayed. The magic of this occurs using a substring, which will show parts of the string until reaching the whole message. As the message is updated, assign it back to the text component so the user can see the change in real time. If we reach the end of the message, we want to return null as to check against that state of the string in an if statement. Let's create a message for the typewriter to show. Thanks for watching this tutorial. Cheers will be our message. We also need an empty message check in the update function to prevent errors. And in order to reference the typewriter from anywhere, create a static reference variable. In order to show more than one message, we are going to use a list to store multiple strings. Assign the static reference. Let's see the typewriter in action with one message. To make the typewriter user interface, I'm using a UI panel. Hold down the Alt key and select the center anchor button to undo the stretch. Adjust width and height. And a text component as the child component. If you hold down Alt and click the bottom right corner anchor, it will stretch the rect transform's dimension to fit the parent dimension, then use a number for the buffer. Also, I'm centering the text and changing font size, and adding a shadow component to help with visibility. After the component is made, add the typewriter script and assign the text component to the text component variable. And we're all set up. Play the scene again. Looks good. One thing to note is the message wraps a bit odd when the text is shown over time. To help with this, you want to add some empty text to the string that serves as a buffer. That way, the text moves smoother over time. And don't worry, this color is invisible to the user. Play the scene again. If you look closely, the color is added to the string. The buffer helps with the exposition as it's shown from left to right. So what I want to do is attach a button to the typewriter component right here. So when I click on it, the message will change to a random message inside the message array. In order to get the button to grab a random message, we have to add some strings to the string list. Let's create a new function to be used on the button click. It will simply assign the current message to the random index inside the list. Also, make sure to set the char index variable to 0. So now that the function is done, what you want to do is add a button component to the typewriter UI component. So add button, and then create a new onClick event. drag on the typewriter script to that variable, and then just look for the new function that we created on the typewriter script. Write random message. Then run the scene, and every time you click this UI panel, it'll grab a message from the array randomly. Now, what if you don't want to wait for the message to finish? You want to skip through it. So when you click, while it's typing, it shows the whole message. We need an isActive flag to indicate whether the writer is currently typing. If it's actively typing, return the entire message and stop typing. We also have to return false if the current message doesn't exist in the isActive flag. So now when I run the scene, when I click, it'll show the full message. So it's typing, I click, and it shows the full message. So that way you can sort of skip through messages. If we want to show messages from first line to last line, create a message index. Then assign the current message to the first in the list. Update the function to say, write next message in queue. Change to message index. With this, we will increment in the string list after every button click. If we reach the end of the message list, return nothing, and the text component can be blank. Eventually, we will add callback functionality. Set the text component's text to blank. Now that the next message in queue function is written, what I went ahead and did is added 3 new messages to the message list, starting with 1, 2, and 3. And then when you go ahead and run the new function in the scene, what you're going to see is it's going to run the first message and then go down the list. So we'll find the button where the typewriter is, open up in a new on-click event, drag on the typewriter script, look for the new function, and then when I run the scene, it'll go from 1, 2, 3 when I, click through them. So message 1, message 2, and then message 3. And there you go. That's how you run through multiple messages from one to the very last one. So we can add messages anywhere in our code. Let's create a static function for adding messages. Then we can call activate in our script to start typing. In this example script, I'm adding messages to the typewriter and using the activate function. Hey, so what if you want each line to have its own callback or its own timer for each line? Well, then let's look at creating a class for it. Create a class called Typewriter Message. Then simply grab the variables we are already using in the typewriter script and put them into the class instead. Also, update functionality and put that code into the class. Then we want to return the current message and keep track of its display in a display message variable. Once the display message variable is done, swap out the temporary string variable with the display message variable. And remove the text component reference here. Then create 2 functions that return both the current message and the display message. The current message will be used when we want the full message to show, and the display message will be used to update the text component in real time. I'm using functions as a preference, but you could always make these variables public and use the variables instead of functions. swap the strings in the typewriter script to typewriter message. Now that we swapped string with typewriter message, we need to modify the static function add. Make a typewriter message constructor function and assign the current message when it's created. Then add the new constructor to the static function, and we add the typewriter message instance to the message list. In the typewriter class update function, check it to see if there are messages in the list. If a current message exists, call its update function. Then assign the text back to the text component. You can remove the return statement in the typewriter update function. Then re-add it to the typewriter message update function instead. Remove the isActive function from the typewriter class and re-add the active function to the typewriter message class instead. Now in the write next message in queue function, we can check to see if the current message is active. Call the current message getFullMessage function and remove the char index equals 0. We also need a current message null check here. To add callback functionality to the message, we need to use the system library. Then create an action callback variable. Update the getFullMessage function to include a callback for testing. Update the function here as well. Create a callback function that references the callback action. We will use this later in our code. Add an action parameter to the typewriter message constructor and default it to null, so we don't have to have it. And add an action parameter to the static add function as well, and to the modified class constructor. If we reach the end of the message in the typewriter message class, add the callback. So in our typewriter assistant script, we can add callbacks as part of the static function now. When each message is finished typing, we will have it show a debug message so we can now see that it's working. So what we're going to do is the first message will show something, the second message won't show anything, and the third message will show a final debug log. Now notice the debug log message is appearing based on the callback. And that's how you do callbacks. Let's create a scriptable object that we will use to put string data into our typewriter. We're going to copy the messages typewriter list and bring it over to our new scriptable object. This is just another method by which data can be added, and you can modify the messages in the inspector window. This will allow us to create scriptable objects in the drop-down buttons up top in the editor window. And one thing to note is that this script, the typewriter scriptable object, needs to go directly in the assets main folder in your project, since we are using the asset menu. The scriptable objects don't have a callback, so make a function that returns only the current message. Then create another static function, but this function makes use of the scriptable object and adds its messaging to the typewriter. So for every message in the scriptable object, add to the message list. Back to our Typewriter Assistant class, make a public variable for the scriptable object so we can assign it from the inspector. Then simply call typewriter.add and put in the new scriptable object variable in the parameter. To be able to see and modify the string variable in the inspector in the scriptable object class, we need to serialize the Typewriter message class and serialize the current message string variable. So the cool thing is now that I have a scriptable object creation script, I can go ahead and go to Assets, Create Scriptable Objects, and then go to the Typewriter Scriptable Object. Once I create that, let me give it a name so I can find it, like Typewriter or something. And then we'll go ahead and drag that new Typewriter Scriptable Object to the Typewriter Assistant script, like that. And then if I actually open it up, I can add some messages to it that we can, configure. So let's do let's say 4 messages. Message 1. This is message 3, and that's another one to show. So now when I play my scene, it'll go down these messages. Okay, message 1, this is another message, message 3, and another one to show. So this is just another method of being able to add messages to the typewriter using a scriptable object. And now I just want to go over how to do it using JSON. So for the JSON data object, we want to use system.serializable and create a class called message.json that uses a message variable. Then create a typewriter JSON with a message array. Also, change the string to typewriter message. Create a new static function that takes a JSON object as a parameter. And for every JSON message, add a message to the typewriter message list. Again, back to our Typewriter Assistant class, create a text asset variable that will store the text file and a JSON variable that will be used when the JSON is extracted from the text file. Use the add function again, but pass in the JSON class. This is an example of the JSON. I use Notepad to make a text file and am following the JSON class structure. Every message here will display from the typewriter. Okay, so to see the JSON in action, that text file I made, it's right here. I called it typewriter, and it's just a text file. I'll go ahead and drag the text file to the text asset in the Typewriter Assistant script. And I also changed this as well, so we'll be only showing the JSON when the typewriter is activated. Then when I run the scene, it should go through those 2 messages that we wrote in the JSON file. Here's the first one, and then here's the second one. And that's it. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please post down below. And if you like videos like this, tutorials, definitely let me know. And thanks again for watching, and have a good one.